Welcome in, everyone. We're starting this hour of KPRC 2 Plus now, live in downtown Houston with some new developments from our team covering the AJ Armstrong murder trial for the bench. There was supposed to be a hearing this morning over that bombshell from last week involving new DNA evidence in the case. But like a lot of things with this trial, that is now delayed as well. KPRC 2 Investigates was the first to report the new DNA evidence after multiple sources confirmed it was found on AJ Armstrong the night his parents were murdered in 2016. That is the question this morning. Will the judge allow the evidence to be admitted at this late date? The hearing this morning was supposed to determine that. So, as you can see, a lot is still up in the air. I'm going to send you back out to the courthouse where our team is standing by, ready to help us navigate all of this. And I'll see you back here in just a bit.
Holy cow, we had a little delay there, and the reason we had a delay is Letitia literally jumped over, straight back.
We're going to start putting your arm behind you here.
Come out to us. That was,
exactly.
Are you okay?
I am fine, but what I'm more impressed with is the fact that
Jason tried to save you.
And went down with me. And he went down with me. So,
and I didn't do hardly anything.
No, you just watched.
I have that back.
You just watched.
And now we know
you were on the wrong side.
I've never been part of a production like that. But everybody's okay, right?
Everybody's fine.
Okay, good to hear, because we have a lot to talk about today. AJ Armstrong, trial number 3. We've been trying to get to opening statements, which are now delayed to July 31st. I think I have to take care of a little bit of housekeeping first, because you can see there's a different lineup today on the bench. That is Jason Wynn on the end, producer extraordinaire. He has actually been in the courtroom with Rilwan, who has the week off. I think every day there's been something going on.
And it's been a crazy, there was supposed to be something going on today.
Let's talk about that. What was supposed to happen
It was
today?
the motion to suppress that was supposed to happen today. We were all supposed to go in the courthouse here in about an hour. They were supposed to talk about evidence that we found out was DNA evidence related to this whole trial. So we're talking about something that's happening.
We've had already 2 full trials. It's been, what, 7 years?
Correct.
And this is newly discovered DNA evidence?
Multiple sources tell us.
How does that happen?
Yeah, well, obviously somebody did some testing on this evidence, and from what our sources say is they wanted to know what was in it, what they had. They wanted the one sweep through. We had a couple of people tell us that they just wanted to make sure that all the evidence, they went over it with a fine-tooth comb. And our sources tell us that they found DNA on the clothing.
So let's talk about this. Letitia, criminal defense attorney to the stars, what is sort of your take on DNA evidence suddenly appearing after this long? For the first time, right? How does that work?
That is the million-dollar question. All I can say about this trial is that the plot thickens as the day goes on. I have so many questions.
Me too.
About DNA that's suddenly found 7 years later after 2 trials. And it stated, oh, we want to do one last sweep. And did you not want to do that sweep after trial 1?
Right.
Before trial 1? after trial 2, before trial 2?
Well, let me do a little pushback there, though. But couldn't they just say, well, the technology is a lot better nowadays, so we wanted to check it out?
No. The same technology that was available 7 years ago, certainly in 2022, is available today. So trace evidence, guys, is probably more than likely what we're talking about. And trace evidence is basically where they go in with a fine-tooth comb looking for any little speck, right, of DNA evidence or something of that sort. Now, what we've learned is that our sources have told us is that they don't know what type of DNA that this is. So we don't know if this is blood, we don't know if this is saliva, we don't know that if it's touch DNA.
And that's what we've been reporting all along, because, you know, there's other people that have speculated that it was blood that was found on this. And my question, you're the lawyer, if they do have this evidence, what do they test it for? You know, do they test it, you know, what kind of DNA is it? Do they test, is it blood? Is it, you know, saliva? Is it the touch? Like, how do you go about something like that?
So that's predicated on a lot of factors. Number one, in order to test whether or not it's blood, saliva, or what have you, or whose blood it is, you have to have enough DNA to go around. Meaning that in order to find out if it's blood or saliva, you have to have enough to make that test. Then if you want to find out whose DNA it is, you have to have another set in order to do that test. So if we don't know what type of DNA it is, I'm willing to bet there wasn't enough to make that determination.
And then how is it useful?
Well, it's useful because, I mean, the prosecution, I am certain, is jumping up for joy because now they found DNA on AJ.
For the first time,
Well,
right?
let me say this, not
let me ask you a
AJ,
question, because they're saying that they found it on, well, they said they found it on him. It was on his clothing. It was clothing evidence to say. We know that there was a shirt that was tested. We also know that there were pants that were tested, and there's some sort of sticker that was involved that may or may not have been tested as well. So given that let's just throw it out there, that his clothes that day were tested for new DNA. If they don't find the DNA in one place or the other, say they find it, you know, on the shirt, but not the pants, or not, you know, what does that mean for a defense lawyer or a prosecutor? Like, how do you change your arguments towards where the DNA is found?
So let's use your hypothetical. That is actually found on the shirt, okay, as opposed to on the pants or anything else. That's going to beg a question. If you are the murderer, right, of two individuals, and you've shot them up close range, you mean to tell me that DNA suddenly only gets on your shirt and not on your pants?
Yeah.
And then we don't find it until 7 years later? Oh, if I'm the defense attorney in this, I'm having a field day.
Yeah, you're going to pick that apart.
Oh, I'm going to pick it apart.
Jason, you mentioned something about a sticker. What does that mean exactly?
So what we understood is, and this is coming from multiple people, is that when he was being interviewed by the police, that he had like a visitor sticker. He had like his name, Houston Police Department, and the sticker was put on him. And it was just an identifier, you know. It's something you would wear, something I would wear. You know, it's like a hospital when they give you their little bracelet and you have your identifier there as a visitor.
That would be something that was not at the crime scene, however.
No, that would be something when he walked into the police department and they put it on.
And we don't know exactly for sure where the DNA evidence is, right?
We don't know where
If it's on the
DNA
sticker, the sticker's not at the crime scene, how useful is the DNA on the sticker? And how does it get there?
That gives you even more questions to ask, right? So whenever you go to 1200 Travis, which is where the homicide division is housed, that's their headquarters. When you check in downstairs, they're going to give you a visitor's tag, a sticker that they place on you, okay?
Even has your picture on it.
Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I've gotten it myself. So.
And so I'm willing to bet that's the sticker that we're talking about, because you have to have that when you go into the homicide division for any type of questioning. And so 9 times out of 10, that is the sticker. And our sources pretty much tell us that. And so the question then becomes, how is it, if it's hypothetical number 2, if it's on the sticker and not on the clothing?
There could be transfer, his hand transfer.
Absolutely.
We are completely spitballing here, right?
It could be, but
Well,
I mean,
listen.
but I think that's the same thing that they're spitballing in there.
Yeah.
So if I was to touch you today, when you leave here, you're going to have my DNA on your hand.
Correct.
Right? It's sweaty out here, it's muggy out here, so we're all perspiring. And so because of that, there will be transference. Now, when I leave here, God forbid, if somebody was to murder me and they said, well, the last people that she was with was Joel, you know.
Well, you
and
definitely have my DNA on you.
Exactly, because you caught me when I fell. Then you have my DNA on you. And now all of a sudden, are you a suspect?
Yeah, true.
You know, so these are all the questions that as a defense attorney that I would be asking.
These are all the questions, it seems to me, should have been asked 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it should have, but it was supposed to be talked about today,
Right.
which was why we were supposed to be here. But sometime this morning, yesterday, they pushed it to the start of the
And they
hearing.
pushed it to when we were supposed to, now with the delayed opening statement, supposed to happen on the 31st of July. Now they're going to have this hearing before they start that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or they'll have it during trial. They may start opening statements and have it during trial.
We all know that
Well-
court cases sort of like roll along, not always at the fastest speed, but to me, I mean, is this an irregular amount of delays going on in this one?
It really depends. With these type of high-profile cases, T's are being crossed, I's are being dotted. And whenever you have these types of cases, any little issue that comes up, they want to make sure they're getting it right. And so a lot of times that's what causes, you know, the delay. But to the point of when it will start, when they will have this hearing, a lot of time the prosecution as well as the defense will say, no, Judge, we want to have this hearing before opening statements because we want to talk about it in opening statements.
Yet they're not ready to talk about it today, I guess.
Not ready, obviously, to talk about it today. They probably want to carry it with the trial so that they can kind of preserve the outcome of the hearing in terms of what the potential jurors would hear.
From what we know, how critical is it if this does or doesn't get into the trial, this DNA evidence? I mean, will it really, given the circumstances, will it really sway a jury, do you believe, to hear that a sticker or an item of clothing may have had a dab of blood on it? Is that a real linchpin for the prosecution's case?
It certainly could. You know, it could. If I'm the prosecutor, I'm celebrating now because now I have something. Because remember, one of the defense's arguments was that there was no scientific evidence, forensic evidence, that tied him to the actual crime. Well, now they have something, and so this is something they can, you know, grab onto. But if I'm the defense, I'm saying, this is nonsense, guys. You guys thought AJ was a suspect from day one. You want us to believe that you didn't go through his clothing with a fine-tooth comb 7 years ago? You found nothing? And then you want us to believe trial 2?
Or
that
last
you
year.
didn't,
Last year.
That seems
try
like
anything?
a tough mountain to climb.
Sure. Sure. It's
Okay, we got to
huge.
talk about some other stuff. One of them is last week when I get my weeks almost confused. We were supposed to start last week, right?
Yes.
Was it
2 weeks ago,
So we did a show last week, and everybody was here. We were all getting ready for the big start of the trial. This is before all the motion to suppress stuff broke, and the uncle flew into town, the great uncle, and he's among
from Atlanta.
Was he from
Yes.
Atlanta? And he's
Armstrong.
among the throngs of family members who support AJ.
Yes.
And there's been
And he's Antonio
wavering.
Armstrong Sr.'s brother.
Brother.
Or, his uncle.
Yeah, it's
So it's
we're trying to figure
Antonio
out the family.
Jr.'s great uncle.
So I mean,
So this
he's
is
in
the
the
guy
corner
that
of
watched him
AJ
grow
clearly.
up. He watched
He
both
shows up
boys.
here in Houston, and he was certainly nonplussed, I would say, by things moving slowly, and that there was a third trial at all. Can we hear from AJ's great uncle here?
You said we know he's innocent. Explain to me more about that. Talk more about that.
Well, of course I'm by him, family member, but even as a community, as a person in the city, of just a citizen, you haven't given me enough evidence to say that you did it. He did it. So no, and I know he didn't. But even 2 other juries felt the same way. He's had 2 hung juries. So both of them have said, hey, you didn't do it. So why are we still here? That's the question. Houston, why are we still here 7 years later with postponements, with 2 hung juries? And we still here? Taxpayers should be up and raw. They should be disappointed that we're still paying for this. I mean, come on, it's time to let the kid go home. 7 years. Enough is enough, Houston.
AJ Armstrong is in fact himself now a father, 23 years old, and now things, at least opening statements, we don't think will start till July 31st, possibly even later if we have this hearing before that. Let's talk about, I don't know, let's talk about access, and let's talk about, because from a reporter's standpoint, there are a lot of documents that are now under seal.
Yes.
What does that, one, mean, and two, why are they under seal?
I think it's to preserve the evidence and to preserve the integrity of the trial. And that's not such a bad thing, but you have to balance that with the fact that a trial is supposed to be public, right? And the reason it's supposed to be public is because the defendant has that right that the public should hear what's going on in that courtroom in order to protect his constitutional rights. But at the same time, the judge has to weigh that against what this potential jury is hearing outside of the courtroom. You want everything that that jury considers to be something that comes from the witness stand or that is offered into evidence, not necessarily from people like us, you know, but at the same time, you got to weigh that balance with the public and make the determination, how do we protect AJ's constitutional rights while at the same time protecting the integrity of the trial?
What's the nature of the material or the documents that would be under seal? Do we know that? I mean, what are they protecting?
I'm willing to bet a lot of it is going to be that's DNA evidence that was newly discovered. That's going to be part of it, and it could be any number of things.
Could also be the witnesses with the alarm.
Have we hashed out that
No,
the
that's
issue?
still on hold too.
Run us through exactly what that issue is.
Originally, you know, there was a person that the prosecution, that the state was trying to talk to as a witness. After talking to him, it was a VP of alarm.com. He was a VP over one of the services. And that person, after John Jordan and Ryan Trask got to talking to him, they were like, wait, you're an expert witness. So they went to court. This was back on May 23rd, and on the 24th, they told the court, hey, we want to change this guy to an expert, which threw the first hoopla into the air, because then it was like DeToto's team was saying, hey, we didn't have enough time to vet this guy. We don't know him as an expert. We may want to call in our own people to be an expert to testify against him. So there was a whole timing thing there.
Which hasn't been hashed out fully yet.
Which hasn't been hashed out.
Is that also something they'll address on the 31st? I mean, when is all this stuff being addressed?
I'm fairly certain on the 31st they will get to a conclusion in regards to that issue.
Okay.
However, now the defense has had enough time. If we're waiting to the 31st, any vetting that needs to be done certainly could be done by then.
Yeah.
There's certainly always new twists and turns in this case. There's no shortage of that, because we've done, I think, 8 episodes now, and we haven't even heard opening statements yet. We're going to keep pressing away. You can be sure of that. I'm so glad you weren't injured in that incident.
Thanks to Jason.
Crazy fireworks before the show.
She literally tipped over like this.
Literally. And Jason
there
went
was me
with
going, no.
Yes.
Wow, that was right as the
You
show.
can be on my team anytime,
All right,
Jason.
I like it. You heard that first.
That's live internet television for you. All right, that's what we have today for you on the bench. Of course, we're going to stay on top of this trial for you. Let's send it back to Zach in the studio.
Yeah, we're glad everyone is okay. Joel, thank you very much. Remember, this is part of our new multimedia approach to trial coverage. Our team is keeping track of the latest trial developments. Be sure to stick with KPRC 2 News for the latest.